However, you hardly need to take on a horror movie marathon to celebrate Halloween. The capital has a long track record of ghost sightings, mysterious murders, strange disappearances, and many more spooky occurrences. Here are some of the creepiest real-life stories that haunt London's past. The eerie Enfield poltergeist. The alleged poltergeist hauntings in Enfield became so famous that the events were turned into the movie The Conjuring 2. The true story behind the blockbuster is just as creepy. In 1977, the Hodgson family started reporting strange activities around their house in Enfield, North London. This included heavy furniture moving on its own, unexplained sounds and voices, sudden temperature drops, and objects being thrown across the house. Most of the supernatural activity seemed to center on one of the children, Janet. Some people even reported hearing the young girl speaking in different voices, including that of a ghost allegedly named Bill. And here's the most disturbing part. There were accounts of a man named Bill who had died in the house before the Hodgsons moved in. Bill supposedly died of a hemorrhage in the living room, a detail that Janet seemed to know, but no one could explain how Janet knew about Bill's death. Several paranormal investigators visited the house while it was allegedly haunted, with some of them believing that it was a genuine poltergeist and others believing that it was a hoax. A few people suggested that the Hodgson family did experience some real supernatural activity, but Janet faked and exaggerated some of it in order to gain even more media attention. However, the Enfield poltergeist is said to have suddenly stopped in 1979, and the mystery of whether the ghost was real remains unsolved. The mysterious disappearance of Lord Lucan. The circumstances surrounding the disappearance of Richard John Bingham, 7th Earl of Lucan, sparked decades worth of speculation. Lord Lucan was a wealthy London peer accused of bludgeoning his family's nanny to death in November 1974. After killing the nanny in the basement of the family home in Belgravia, Lucan also attacked his estranged wife, who managed to escape and run to a nearby pub asking for help. Lady Lucan identified her husband as the assailant, but by the time the police started investigating the case, Lord Lucan had vanished without a trace. He was last seen a few hours after the murder, and the following morning his car was spotted miles from the crime scene. The car was covered in blood, and it had a lead pipe in its boot. However, Lucan himself was nowhere to be found. The 50 Berkeley Square. The house on 50 Berkeley Square, in Mayfair, is allegedly the most haunted house in London. It was built in the affluent neighborhood in the late 18th century, but it wasn't until the 1860s that the house started to develop its sinister reputation. In 1859, a man named Mr. Myers moved into the site. Rumors said that he lived as a recluse and was gradually going mad. The house's condition began to deteriorate, and tales began to surface about people who allegedly saw apparitions so terrifying they went mad or died of fright. Legend has it that, in 1879, a maid who stayed in the house's attic room for a night supposedly went mad and was taken to an asylum, where she died the following day. A few years later, in 1887, it was claimed that two sailors spent a night in the house, but the next morning one of them was found dead, and the other claimed that the ghost of Mr. Myers had attacked them. Apart from the ghost of Mr. Myers and the brown apparition, the house was also said to feature the spirit of a young woman who, according to legend, committed suicide on the top floor to escape an abusive uncle. Her ghost haunted the house 4 years after her death. The ghostly activity around the place seems to have stopped in more recent years, but the fearsome reputation of 50 Berkeley Square lives on. With so many chilling events in London's history, perhaps this year you can celebrate. There were 3 sets of correspondence about 50 Berkeley Square in the Journal Notes and Queries, in 1872-73, 1879, and 1880-81. A common conclusion was that the neglect of the house had inspired the imaginative stories about hauntings. There were 3 sets of correspondence about 50 Berkeley Square. In her autobiography, published in 1906, Lady Dorothy Neville stated that Mr. Myers was a relative of hers. After he had lost his fiancée, his behavior bordered upon lunacy, and he stayed in the house all day, becoming active at night, when he rambled about, making strange sounds. Modern researchers have suggested that the house was never haunted and that many of the stories were either exaggerated or invented by later writers. For example, the claim that sailors entered the house in the 1870s was invented by Elliot O'Donnell, and there is no evidence to confirm any part of. Once declared the most haunted house in London, 50 Berkeley Square has a body count to send shivers down your spine. This one is not for the faint-hearted. The gruesome legend of 50 Berkeley Square is made up of many isolated incidents. One of the most haunting is that of Captain Kenfield, a guest at the Mayfair House. His visit got off to an uneasy start when a terrified scream ripped through the ceiling. He and his hosts raced upstairs to find a young maid gibbering on the floor of what was to be his bedroom. Not wanting to come across a coward, the captain resolved to stay in that room regardless. In the middle of the night, however, his hosts were awakened by a frightful bellowing, a gunshot, and then silence. 50 Berkeley Square may look like an unassuming Georgian house, but its history is full of such incidents. Many of its former residents have either died or gone insane. So many, in fact, that it was at one point made exempt from council tax. The attic in particular is said to be a place of devilish happenings. Legend has it that a young girl threw herself out of its window, and her spirit has remained chained to the property ever since. Various eyewitness accounts claim to have seen her ghostly white figure or a strange brown mist. She's not alone there, however. Two more spirits are said to lurk the attic's rafters. A child believed to have been killed by a servant, and the ghost of a young man, locked there and fed through a hole in the door, until he eventually succumbed to madness and death. The tales are so wild and frightening that, in his book, Haunted Houses, published 1913, Charles Harper claimed that 50 Berkeley Square was haunted by an unnamed Rawhead and Bloody Bones, a being now better known as the Bogeyman. The truth of number 50 is likely less fantastical and more sad. The house fell into disrepair and, when he passed, was left to decay. This, of course, only added to its legend, the reclusive Myers whose spirit succumbed to a deep and lonely depression. A classic victim.